Jeffrey L. Boney for another live edition of Real Talk Junkies. Man, so glad that you could join us on today. Another hot show. Man, we're excited. 2022, we're in the midst of Black History Month. And let me just tell you, today we want to talk about a crown jewel that's nestled right here in the heart of Freedmanstown in Houston's historic Fourth Ward community. It is called the African American Library at the Gregory School. Here today to talk about the rich history, the origin, and the latest large addition to the African American Library at the Gregory School is none other than Mr. Miguel Caesar. Come and join us today on Real Talk Junkies, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much. Miguel, let me just give y'all a little breakdown of who Miguel is. Are you the singer? You have to sing him.
No, sir.
Okay, all right. I didn't know if I was going to have you do a little song for us. But anyway, Miguel is the current manager at the African American Library at the Gregory School. As part of the Houston Public Library. He has over 14 years of experience in archives and libraries, including public and academic. He's led and assisted in research, acquisition, preservation, cataloging, and digitization efforts for local, state, and national historical materials. Before joining the Houston Public Library Special Collections, he was employed at the John B. Coleman Library at Prairie View A&M University as a reference and instruction librarian. He also holds a bachelor's in business administration, a master's of community development from Prairie View A&M University, Prairie View A&M University, Texas Southern here, and a master of library science and information from Texas Women's University. I got an interesting story about that. Welcome to Real Talk Junkies, Mr. Miguel.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so at the end, we're going to talk a little bit because, we are in Black History Month, and I want to share a few things with you all as part of my closing monologue on someone that I consider to be one of my historical heroes, and that is Mr. Frederick Douglass. So stay tuned for that. But let's get right into it. So Miguel, talk about the African American Library at the Gregory School. Let's talk about the history of that, the origin.
So the African American Library at the Gregory School is located in Freedmanstown. It was established in 1870 as the first education institution for newly emancipated slaves, children to be exact. It's been, well, I guess the building that we're in now, the original building was 1907, and then something mysteriously happened to it, burned down. No one really figured out what happened.
But we know we know what happened.
Usually, we know what happened. But the current building we're in was built in 1926, and it serves as a education institution for Houston Public Library. I want to say to the late 80s till they started integrating the schools, and then it was closed down. At that point, the kids from the namesake of Gregory merged with Gregory Lincoln, which is located in Fourth Ward on Taft Street. But Houston Public Library acquired it from HPL. Houston Public Library acquired it from the city of Houston and converted it to an archival research library that it is today.
I've had the chance to go by several times to the African American Library at the Gregory School, and I encourage anyone who hasn't gone by there. We'll give you address and information on that a little later, but it is an amazing institution that's been around for some time. But the work that you all do, the displays that you all have, so much rich history about African American life here in the city of Houston primarily. But I think it's even more, I guess, emotional for me because I have the great privilege of working here at the historic Houston Forward Times newspaper as the editor, and going through our archives and knowing how much history we've told through our newspaper. And we have some exciting news. I want to jump right into it before we get into some of the other things at the Gregory School. But the Houston Forward Times has just made history as part of the African American Library.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
talk about that?
Yes, sir. So after courting, so to speak,
let's break it down. What actually happened? Tell the whole story.
So I've been chasing the Forward Times physical archives for probably 2 to 3 years now, and I talked with Miss Karen, the owner. She wasn't quite ready to to let go or let us take care of the items. And
you saying she had trust issues. You saying Miss Karen had trust issues.
She had a few trust issues, and it's understandable.
Right, but before you go on, because a lot of the listeners who are watching right now, they may not even know what you're talking about,
Okay.
the archives and all that type of stuff. What actually were you trying to get from the Forward Times?
So I was trying to get the old physical newspapers. So what we do at an archives and the archivists, we are the caretakers of documents where we put things in acid-free containers. We have climate control rooms. We have other archivists on staff that main duty is to take care and preserve the life of physical items.
Mm-hmm.
And we have one dedicated exclusively to African American history. So a lot of times when I go out to the community and like churches, newspapers, and things like that, we have been conditioned to take care of our own items, mainly because the ruling majority in the past didn't deem those items that important. So in turn, we just make sure we kept our items at home and close to the vest, for ourselves. So back to Forward Times, having to break down those hurdles or very is a lot. A lot of give and take, a lot of constant talking, communications, making people comfortable to understand that I'm here to help. Not
So why was
take.
this important for you to get the Forward Times archives of all?
Very important.
Why?
Very important.
Why?
Because well, let's just go back to like you said, right after emancipation, or what, 62 years from now, when segregation, Jim Crow laws were in effect. Uh, the dominant culture at the time was not documenting African American news, and so having the Forward Times and other African American newspaper of the community, it gave a complete picture of the history of what was going on during the times, blacks as we would call in that time period, of the community and the things that we wanted to know, not just what the uh, the white newspaper were only publishing like bad things that happened in the community, but we were able to get a complete picture of what was going on in our community from people within the community, and it was well documented with the Forward Times. And we do have it on microfilm, a complete run, but it's something about having the original documents to see those newspapers and to be able to touch history, not necessarily just see it scanned in. It's very important, and that's exactly what we stand for.
I think about the fact that in our schools, public schools, and even in many of our educational institutions of higher learning, there's a limited scope on Black history. When we talk about Black history or African American history in this country, they limit the conversation and all of the things that went on during those times. And the one thing that I really, really appreciate about the African American Library at the Gregory School is the fact that you all show all of this history across Houston. The original plat for Fourth Ward, Freedmanstown.
Yes, sir.
To talk about, I see NAACP cards as far as their membership cards and all these other historical figures that have come through Houston that have made an impact has made Houston and African Americans' quality of life in Houston so much better because of their involvement, their engagement, them being birthed into this world here in Houston. So to hear you say that what we've been able to chronicle over 62 years, never missing a week in the print. And the crazy part, y'all, RTJs, is that the physical, we're talking about going back to our founding in 1960. 1960, y'all. We have the original papers that have been bound in books. But, when you think about the fact that as the weather and other elements, especially in Houston, man, with the humidity and all that, have impacted those or could impact potentially those older fragile pieces of paper. We're talking about papers from the 60s.
Yes, sir.
It's
older than some of us.
Yeah, well, it's definitely older than me.
Older than me.
And so, to have this happen,
yes, sir.
and to have it be carefully taken care of, because you look around the African American library and you think about, Miguel, the fact that there are other people, families, organizations, fraternal organizations, sororities, churches, who have given their archives or many of their things that they may not even look at and be like, man, this is not important or whatever.
We get that.
They're probably, some people have tossed these things away,
sir.
but you all want these things. Why?
Yes, because most of us don't really know what research value or assign what's archival worthy materials.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, we're trained professionals in that field to determine, what's archival worthy. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is bring your items to us. We'll go through them. Don't have to be in any type of organization. You can just bring it to us, and we can determine what's of value. One of the most important things we are collecting now are obituaries.
Mm.
And I know as African American and blacks in the community, that's everybody has a trunk full of them. Everybody has a Bible full of these obituaries, and that's very important for African American history and research because this is usually the first time that the family would sit down and describe their lineage, who's keeping the who. We can find careers, education, military records. All this is within those obituaries, and especially Houston families. So we're encouraging anyone who actually have any of those items to stop by the Gregory School, drop those off to us. We're actually digitizing those and putting them online as well.
So let me ask you this: the Boney family, or of
Sir.
course, I have a family, or any family, Smith family, the Washington family. I feel like we have a rich lineage in the city of Houston. So if I feel that way, and I have all of these documents, Big Mama kept all of these newspapers or artifacts, clippings, or maybe there were some things specific to our family or to that family that maybe is not something that I want to keep.
Yes,
but I don't want to forget my history.
Exactly.
I would come to you and
sir.
say, hey, I want to put. Can I come to you and say, you know what? I really would like to have something for my family, ABC family, as part of the Gregory School, that if anyone came, or including my family, I could go in there and see all of the things tied to my family.
Absolutely.
Is that possible?
That's exactly what we do. So no collection is too small, no family is too insignificant. You don't. We document everything from the grassroots up. So you don't have to be Mickey Leland or Barbara Jordan or anybody like that. We want to document everyday African Americans that help tell the full picture of what everyday life was during a specific time period, whether it was your family or someone else's family. Just having those photographs of when you went to school, having report cards, having uh, receipts from a concert, things like that. Everything serves a purpose. And you should definitely bring it by. Sit with an archivist. We'll have we call it a donor meeting where you can sit down and explain to me why this is important to you and, explain what you have. And then in turn, I'll tell you, okay, this is what, we can do and this is what we will do.
I was, when my mother and my father passed away, I was tasked with doing things with the house.
Yes.
It took me a minute to actually move anybody in to rent it or even clear out the things in the house because of course, that being my mother and my father. But when I finally did it, I found so many things, and there were certain things that I found in there. And I actually have my own little, I guess, archivist collection. But I have my dad's, you know, diploma from Jack Yates High School, a little small one. I have, his birth certificate, that driver's license, social security cards, and different other things. He has certain things, and she had certain things that they kept and held on to. And I'm just like, even when my grandmother, my mom's mother, passed away, she collected things from St. Augustine, Texas, that were in that house and
brought
them.
St. Augustine.
Really?
We'll
talk we got to talk offline about that. You know, we may be, man. We may be. That may not be a good thing for you, but you know, now just
we're here now.
We're here now. But you know, my grandmother's stove.
Yes, sir.
And washboard and things like that. You know, she actually used to make ice cream and buttermilk and all these things. And I mean, it's like I have possession of these things in storage, but it's just like you don't think about the fact that there's an entity like you all out there where, you know, to avoid getting rid of it, discarding it, or figuring out what am I going to do with this? I got a bunch of stuff in my house. I don't want to just keep this in my house. You can actually create your own legacy.
Yeah,
if you will.
Definitely. And let's say, so we focus on documents, photographs, memoirs, newspaper clippings, things of that nature. So, and we do take some artifacts like you were describing. But what you can do, you still come to us with those items. And we have partnerships all around the city with museums, other cultural institutions. Let's say, okay, I couldn't take the washboard. Well, I would call HMAC and ask them, hey, I have a physical artifact. You know, museums usually display in 3D objects. So we can, you know, get you in contact with them. We'll take the papers. We'll make sure we find someone else who would take the physical items of artifacts and things like that. But you need to start with us so we can give you those options and give you that information to where you can actually, you know, don't throw anything away, especially like you said, when parents die and the kids come in, the first thing they do usually just throw things away. We have it set up where we have people that will items to us. They're not ready to give it to us yet, but they'll put it in their will when they pass that their children execute that you know, that request and bring the items that they don't want to us. So there's, like I said, there's really no excuse and no reason for you not to contact us and talk to us.
I'm just really fascinated and just thinking about the fact that, you know, if you want to talk about legacy is important.
Definitely.
People have streets named after them, schools named after them, buildings named after them. And you think about the fact that you may not ever get a ticker tape parade, or you never I want one when I die. Nice. But you know, so y'all remember that, you know, appreciate you. But you know, you may not have a building named after you or a street named after you, a school.
You can have a collection.
But that's what I'm saying. Have a collection. When you talk about establishing a legacy for yourself and for your family, whether individually or just for your lineage, you can actually create one. And anybody across, not only you can see it, but everybody will know about you and your family and be able to remember you for years and decades and centuries to come. Yes. And so that's very exciting to know. I'd like to bring up the Lord Jesus, the CEO and the publisher of the historic Houston Forward Times newspaper, Miss Karen Carter Richards. Come on in, Karen. Yeah, give it up. Good to see you. Welcome to Real Talk Junkies.
Thank you.
I see a memo today.
Yeah. So we talked about before you came aboard here to the show today, the largest collection of African American newspaper, newspapers to the Gregory School, the African American Library, in the history of its existence. As a second generation publisher, one who inherited this from your dad and your mom, I know how difficult it was for you to let go of this, because it's, you know, we'll talk about that and why you eventually made the decision.
I was listening before I got here to Miguel. I heard him say it's been 3 years, but actually it's been 11 years since the Gregory, the African American Library had approached me about our archives. It was really hard for me because, like I told Miguel, those are my babies, you know. But with us celebrating 62 years this year, I felt like it was time. But the books are so precious to me for a lot of reasons. We've been covering Houston for 62 years. All the stories that people don't think about. We were covering families. We were covering our kids' graduations and family reunion, all kinds of things, big events in our communities. But one thing that was really hard, I don't think I've even mentioned it to Jeff or Miguel, is that sometimes a person will call and ask us, can you look for something in 1962, blah, blah, blah. And I would go in later in the evening because I kind of like doing that. I would go and pull the books down and I'll go sit back there thinking that something's going to take me maybe a few minutes, but I would literally sit there and be in there for hours because I was always intrigued by the stuff that I was reading because I was a kid. But one thing that I was going to say that I hadn't probably mentioned to Jeff, and I had to think about it. My father died, who was a founder, when I was 9 years old. So I'm trying not to cry, but I have gotten to know my father through his writings in those books. Because, people knew my father, but at 9, you don't remember. But he was a writer, he was a journalist. So to read all of his writings, I got a chance to know how he thought or how he felt about things that were going on in our community. Why myself, why Jeff, why we stand on certain things and believe certain things, and we still report the truth without fear or favor, because that's what he wanted. So that was the hardest part. It felt like part of my life was leaving, but I knew that I could not house those books the way they needed to be. I would go and look at them and I was like, oh, I got to do something. But I felt like my kids are here around, but I felt like I would have to be the one to make the decision of where they would be. And I'm so happy.
Me too.
So happy to know that they're at the African American Library, that all of that history means nothing if we can't share it with the community after we're long gone. And those are the only things that we can't lose in our community. We are the recorders of our history every day. And we know we doing it here. Yeah, but I'm proud to have it there. And I'm glad you kept pursuing.
Speak on that. So we are actually, one of my assistant managers in her office now, writing a grant.
Wow.
To get, we're starting off with $30,000 to start digitizing these items professionally. So the plan is to get this grant. I think the company we're talking to is in Colorado. So if everything goes well, we get the grant. They're going to drive down here and pick them up, take them back, and digitize them. And I did overestimated how much the project would be. Well, I should say underestimated, because it's essentially $1 a page.
Wow.
So think about that. So I'm sure there's 100,000 pages in those 30 books. So it's going to take a couple of grants to get this, all of them digitized. But we are definitely committed to doing that because, like you said, it's important that we transfer it into a different format as well. So, you have microfilm, but it's not the same as a newspaper or even a scan of a newspaper. And even by scanning these items, we can create an index of the stories and the words of it. So you can go in there and search a name, and it's going to pull up those articles that actually had their name in it or their topic. So and then we're going to put it online.
Wow,
so you can actually, anybody in the world, if they're doing research on African American history, whether it's in Houston or anywhere, they can come to the Black newspaper because that's usually where everyone's going to have to start.
Right.
and they'll have access to this, and that's definitely the plan.
Man, wow! I mean, you just got hit with some updated information, and I've had the great privilege of spending time bringing the books out and sitting them down and looking at how sugar was like 19 cents.
I know.
Different other things. You can get a car for $2,300, $2,800. I'm like, really? But not only that, many of the stories that are covered, and to think that people like Bud Johnson and Barry Shields and many others, Ralph Cooper and Dr. The Reverend Lawson, who wrote for our paper, who was with Pastor Emeritus at Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. Those individuals will be living on, so that if someone wanted to know the writings of Bud Johnson or the writings of Ralph Cooper before he became the Ralph Cooper in sports on talk radio, that he in the writings of Reverend Lawson, before he became the pastor, if you will, Wheeler that they can actually, and the writings of Jeffrey L. Boney, that are the newer writings. But you definitely can't forget him. But no, I mean, just to know that people will for eternity be able to revert back to what you all are doing by making this investment into, because it's really an investment into us.
Definitely,
it's an investment into Forward Times. Yes, we're contributing what belongs to us as an asset.
Yes, sir.
But you're, I mean, $1 a page.
Wow.
And that's a significant investment.
Definitely.
Into preserving our rich legacy and history. That's significant. We have any questions from the audience?
Absolutely. We have 2 questions. The first one is, since you've been there, has there ever been a collection that came through that just completely blew you off your feet, that you were just wild that you all had access to such a collection?
Yeah, but a lot of collections. We have like the C.F. Smith Hortense, which was like the first electrician. It's Patricia Smith. That was a great collection. But I think one of the best items I felt like we got early on was the Booker T. Washington book. It was Old Colored High. So they had this ledger that was handwritten with kids that graduated. Wow. And so about 1930s, when you don't think African Americans and blacks are going to college, there's a section in there where they have schools where they went to college at. And at that time, to keep kids from going to school in Texas, they would pay for you to go out of state, to go up north, to get away from Texas. So it was cool to see like the first, what I call HBC that was white, that were allowing kids to go to UC Berkeley, to Chicago, to all these different colleges, and Prairie View and all those. And it was just cool to see that written down. And it took me about 5 years to get that from the Booker T. Washington Alumni Association. So that was a great find. We actually have a original Martin Luther King obituary and eulogy that was who gave me that? I want to say that came from Fontenot, John Fontenot's collection, and that was kind of eerie to like he attended or somebody in his family attended, and we have a physical copy. We digitize it and we don't really bring it out, but just to have those items, it's great.
We actually have 2 more questions. I think I miscounted. That's 3, not 2. The second question is, with all these incredible documents and different things just to be able to archive at your location, why is the Forward Time collection so special to your location?
Because once again, it goes back to being a primary source of African American history when it was just not documented by the dominating culture at that time. To get the stories from the community, and even to hear what publishers, what your father had to go through just to keep telling the truth. Like I'm sure, I think I heard stories where they burned it, they burned the location at one point, or come in and so just a testament that someone put their life on the line just to tell the truth, just to get our information about our community is very important. Very important.
And last question from the audience. This is a kind of a multi-layered question. Are there physical tours available? If so, what can I expect from the tour, and how do I schedule one?
Okay, so we are open right now, Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4. What you can expect when you come into the Gregory School is the first floor is dedicated to telling the history of African Americans. So you'll find a 1926 restored classroom. You'll find 3 galleries designated to Fourth Ward. Then you have one designated to Freemanstown, and then Houston in general. And we also have a traveling exhibit at the end of the hall, just dedicated to African American history throughout the country. So it's not tied into Houston. So you can definitely find that. Tours are self-guided right now due to COVID. But if you have a big group, definitely give us a call at the desk, and we'll mark you down, and
give them a call. Where?
I'm sorry, at the Gregory School. I want to say it's.
We'll get that number.
We'll get that number.
Yeah,
All right, that's
I said the desk.
The end is 1400.
It's the desk right here.
But yeah.
We have a question for Miss Karen and for Jeffrey
Uh-huh.
Boney. You all recently visited and had a tour of the tour that he's talking about. Can each of you tell us what was your favorite or most dynamic part of the tour?
I'm gonna go first.
Yeah, go.
The most dynamic part for me, because I could relate to that, was seeing all the different photographs, because it's like I was looking at forward times to me.
Yes.
Because those are the type of photos that people will find in our archives, the ones you don't think about, the stories, the untold stories, like Hidden Figures. Of that movie was written from a Black newspaper. They had to get that story from a Black newspaper in Norfolk, because our stories weren't important to mainstream media. So we've been telling these stories for 62 years of our community. So to walk in and see that wall of all of these photos of showing our Black people dressed to the nine, and I can go through my archives and see all the society clubs, and the women were beautiful, the men were in tails and tucks. Yeah. And so that, to me, that just kind of, I haven't been able to forget that wall. Perfect. With all the beautiful photos.
Well, for me, number one, absolutely, is seeing the impact and contributions of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And that, I mean, it stood out prominently.
And that's the only Divine Nine that was in the whole museum. We only saw Omega Psi Phi.
Well, we only saw Omega Psi Phi.
That's right.
We chose to see only Omega Psi Phi Fraternity.
Everyone's welcome.
Hey, this is my show. Let me tell you what's going on. Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated was definitely in the house. But no, that, and then of course, looking at the history of certain individuals that many people, probably including myself, had not known about, who were the first this or the first that, and who paved the way for so many individuals. And then the fact that you have people like Richard Allen, who was in Houston, the founder of the African American Episcopal Church, who came down to Houston and was actively involved in Houston life and growth and ministry and a publisher. And so definitely was just everything, just walking around. I know we were touring and doing other things, and we had to move around, but I just wanted to stop. And Karen knows this about me. If I go to museums in different places, I like to just take my time. I don't like to rush through it. I like to embrace it. I love to take it all in. And that's what I was doing. And I really feel like, I didn't do it enough. And I'm coming back.
It takes more than one time.
Yeah, I'm coming back, and I'm definitely going to participate more. And I encourage everybody, RTJs who are watching and listening, to go to the African American Library at the Gregory School, located
at 1300 Victor Street in 4th Ward.
Miguel, you let us know if we can have a Forward Times Day.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Well,
yeah. And speaking of that, you gave us the PDF, so your past issues. So we're actually creating. We're going to start the digital archives of that probably within the next week. We're just working on a landing page to tell a little history about it, but you'll at least be able to go back now and see. I think you gave me 2007 or 8 to present.
Probably 2008 to present in a PDF form.
Yes, ma'am.
But I think you only picked up the books for the archives, the binders from the 60s to some of the 70s.
Yes,
but it's still a lot of the 70s here in the 80s and the 90s.
Yes,
and so
ma'am.
I just want to tell you, I'm so proud of that. Yes, I feel wonderful knowing that this is going to be preserved, like Jeff said. It was hard seeing them just kind of deteriorate, so I feel real good knowing that they're going to be there.
And you spoke to, like you said, felt like you was losing your babies.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to feel like that when you donate your items.
Did.
I know. Huh? So we're not going to bar you from your
items. I'm going to tell you this. The day y'all picked them up, I don't think y'all saw me, but I had pulled up. Yes, I did. Yeah. I had pulled up in the gate, and I sat there and just watched you. I watched them bring them out like in this cart. And I was sitting there going,
she didn't get out. I thought she was going to come and talk to me.
I couldn't get out. I couldn't get out because
Karen is like a mom watching the kids.
Yeah, it was like
going to college.
Yeah, it's like, okay.
We're going 3 miles down the road.
I was like, how many did you get? Okay, what do you have?
I think
I probably called them before they even got back. What y'all doing?
I promise I'm gonna give you an
inventory. And quick question from the audience. This exciting partnership, this whole situation that you all are painting vividly. Tell us how accessible and easy, and why this is so important for the people watching. Like why you all got to this point. What does it mean for the audience?
It means that now you don't have to come to the 4 times physically.
But you can if you still want to get a
tour.
But
if you can, the tours are great. They got some great equipment back there. I think we want to take some pictures of that one day. But it's important that we digitize it and make it available, especially during
the convenience of search.
Right, because right now when they come here, unless they give us a year and pretty much a month, exact date, pretty much. They might say the summer. We try, but you're still looking at a whole lot of papers.
Jeffrey Alboni, can you talk about the convenience, like the convenience of a digital search that they'll experience there?
Yeah, I mean, as a journalist, as someone who just is an avid surfer on the internet, if I'm looking for information, like today, I was looking for some information on the first Navy admiral who was responsible for helping the Battle of defeat the Confederacy at the Battle of Vicksburg. So I just Googled it and was able to find it. And so, like she said, people come here all the time. They're like, my daddy won state with Yates High School or whatever the case may be. And I well, my mama was a cheerleader or a debutante or whatever. And I know she's in the paper, and I think it was 63 or 64.
Sometimes we get lucky. I don't know.
But to be able to now put a name in, narrow it down, filter. And even if you don't have the exact date, or you don't remember the exact date, to be able, you can put your mama's or your daddy or your grandfather or great grandmother's name in and see what happens, right? And I think that's the great thing about this partnership, that we don't have to do a lot of searching for months. To try to find it, to hopefully find it, and this is helpful so that we can actually provide everyone. And then you could be doing research papers. You could be trying to, not only find out about your family, but find out about what was going on in the 60s. Your mama was born in 1962. Okay, what was happening in that time? How they have these things online now where you can say, what happened when I was born? The day I was born or the week I was born. In our case, it would be the week. And so this is very, very helpful. It's convenient, and it's something that we've wanted to do for some time as a entity and organization, and now to be able to do it and have the world renowned African American Library at the Gregory. You got to ride with me now. You got to roll with me. Come on, man. Just co-sign. That's all you do. Co-sign.
We have one more question from the audience.
Yes. Don't say we got one more question. Just say we got another question. We're gonna have a gazillion questions.
One more question. I will one more question at the end. Another question from the audience. Both Karen and Jeff, you all are very versed in the community, spanning decades. Was there anything that you saw? Was there anything? No shade. No shade. Decades and decades and decades.
Yeah, I've been in these streets for a long time.
I wasn't here. Ryan wasn't here, but y'all were here. Was there anything, because we want to let them know that the library is for everybody of all ages. Was there anything that you all, being so versed, was there anything that you all saw that you were able to learn while you were there, or something that was eye-opening to you? Was there any information you came across that was not new information, that expanded on your knowledge?
I saw, but I didn't get a chance to ask Miguel. It was in a glass case. It looked like farming equipment or something.
Yes, ma'am.
And I didn't get a chance to ask about that. And that kind of goes to what Jeff was saying. People have different artifacts, different things at home that they, so just to see some of that old stuff that, I'm kind of old, so I kind of remember seeing some of that stuff in the country.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
those items were found like on the grounds of Gregory and then Fourth Ward. So it was the community using those for farming and digging. I think it was some oil cans and things of that nature. So yeah, definitely those were some items we have.
Well, like I said, for me, to repeat, just knowing the contributions of African Americans in the Houston area that played such a pivotal role in shaping and molding how we now are living and our quality of life in America, particularly here in the greater Houston area. And just to hear you, I mean, to see the plat of Freedmanstown, how they platted it out before it was built out, the map, and where the houses would be and how things would be laid out in the midst of this land that nobody else wanted, the swampy land, but the way they were able to work around what many would look at as a liability or something negative, they made it positive and built upon it to the point where it became later on in life attractive, and they wanted to take it back, as they always do.
It's one of the hottest areas in the city.
Yeah.
Quote unquote Midtown, we still refer to
No.
Freemanstown.
No, we don't call it we don't call it Midtown or Edo or the museum district and all that foolishness. No,
and that's why we need history. That's why we need those newspapers.
So a white lady walking down the street with a dog one night, man. It was dark, and I said, "Man, be careful out here." And she's like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'll be fine." I said, "It still is Third Ward now. I mean, I don't know what you was told."
And I was like, "Don't let that street like this."
I'm like, I don't know what you can believe, but I'm just trying to tell you, it still is the trait. It still is the trait. Let's talk about forums and stuff, because I know also you all, because I moderated one once at the Gregory School. And you all do forums periodically on various subject matters and issues, and I think it would be good to talk through how Forward Times in the Gregory School could do some community forums on key issues and subject matters. But talk about the work y'all do with that.
So we do have another part of the organization that is main goal is to provide programming 2 to 4 times a month. And like you said, these programs are around African American issues, not just pertaining to Houston. So we have a program coordinator that you can, like I said, once again, call the Gregory School. You can sit and talk with her, and we'll determine, what's a good fit, whether we want to have a panel discussion or just a one-on-one discussion, and then we'll promote and get that out. Then there's also the archival part of it. So we program from the archive standpoint, just from what we have in our collection. So that's kind of what this will be. So, and that's done with me and the other archivists, where we'll sit down, we'll have our own show, we'll have our own discussion and program, and talk about the significance of the contributions that you guys have made, and then and why we want it. And we're definitely going to have you as one of our collection and conversation series that we just started, where we talk to our significant donors and just kind of have that conversation on how we got to this point, so people can understand, and you can give them insight into what it took to get there, and the trust, and letting people know that it's a free service that the city pays for, that you pay for. So not free, but it's free of charge when you bring it to us, to have professionals invest in your items. And like you said, we're going to pour at least $100,000 in trying to get it all digitized before it's in, and we have access to that.
Right.
So that's something you can learn from an archival program. Let me bring it back.
So you do have I get a newsletter. Can anybody sign up to get this newsletter?
Yes, ma'am. Usually you have to come in, but you can just actually Google our name and the Gregory School will come up, and just send us an email and ask us to add you to that mailing list. And I'll provide it to you guys so we can attach it later. Yeah. And yes, ma'am. We'll send an email so you'll know exactly what programs are coming up each month.
Well, I'm the president of the Jackie H. National Alumni Association, and I know our group has approached you guys, and we've had conversations about possibly doing some things, because we have a lot of things that should be definitely
archived.
Well, I mean, I'm president.
I just need to work on you.
We celebrated.
Yes, sir.
We celebrated our anniversary, Founders Day, if you will, on yesterday, February 8th, 1926. And so that's 96 years since the founding of Jack Yates High School. And so there's a lot that has taken place over those 96 years. And one thing I will say, because we'll be hitting 100 soon.
Yes, sir.
And so I would like to talk to our executive committee about how we can create a campaign centered around archiving the history, the rich history of the second oldest African American school in the city of Houston, behind Booker T. Washington, the Jack Yates High School. And I think about, like I mentioned earlier, my father's diploma. He got an award once for his class year, and all of the stuff that we have, and listening to all of the people who came out as we celebrated last night at Shape Community Center on Alameda. Just everybody's got this history.
Right.
My grandfather went to Yates, his brothers and sisters, my dad, his brothers and sisters, me and my cousins, we all went to Yates.
My father went to Yates.
Everybody went to Yates. There it is. So, nothing like Jack Yates.
It's not. I agree.
But I'm saying that, there are pictures out there of the Turkey Day Classic and all of that stuff.
Man, we find that in 4 times.
I would like to. What I'm saying is, I would like to work on some sort of a campaign where we, the Forward Times, the Gregory School, and many of these entities out here. I'm speaking about Yates, but there are other entities. There's, like you mentioned, Booker T. Washington, but you got Wheatley, you got Cashmere, you got Booker T. Washington. We already said Booker T. Washington, but you got Wheatley, Cashmere, Worthing, Sterling. I mean, there's a lot of
all the African American schools, and like you were saying, we do community events where we'll come out and have scanning days, donating days. We have an oral history program. I don't think I talked about. Well, we'll come out and set up, and we can get stories of, how was it going to Yates, and just get that oral history, because in our community, once again, a lot of our stories were passed down by word of mouth. So we actually, that's a significant part of our collection as well. And Yates, I was chasing them down before they demoed the original building, and I got there probably 1 or 2 days too late, and they wouldn't let me go in to get some of those items. So that would definitely be welcome.
Well, I think that offline we need to talk about a community service effort whereby because we need to preserve this history. We need to, not only with the pictures and the documentation, but this oral history that you referenced, as well as just getting with these institutions. You have the Houston Citizens Chamber of Commerce, now known as the Greater Houston Black Chamber. I used to serve as president and CEO. Started in 1935. I know they have to have some things. And there's so many other entities.
Like them all, you gotta get me in the door.
right.
Even Unity Bank, which was Riverside.
Yes, ma'am.
My father was one of the original founders of that bank. So that
was that the only African American bank in Texas at the time?
It is. Well, it still is. Still is the only African American, sadly, but it is the only African American bank in the state of Texas. But that's definitely something that I want coming away from this show, that we work on as a community effort, and RTJs and everybody out there listening, we need you to join us on this effort. We're going to come together and get some details out, but going forward, we'll talk about it here and remind everybody, but we'll also put it out there on social media platforms and make sure we build a campaign around this, because we need to preserve our history and preserve our legacy. That sounds like the campaign right there. Preserve our legacy. Preserve our legacy, preserve our history. How about that? Our Black history. There it is. All right, listen, guys, I appreciate you all for joining. And as we close, I just want to actually share a few things with you, seeing that we are in Black History Month. And because we're talking about the Forward Times, we're talking about history, we're talking about the the African American Library at the Gregory School. I got it.
Perfect.
I want to talk about someone that actually means a lot to me, and I mentioned it earlier. Frederick Douglass. He had a quote. He says, "Where justice is denied, where poverty is enforced, where ignorance prevails, and where any one class is made to feel that society is an organized conspiracy to oppress, rob, and degrade them, neither persons nor property will be safe. These profound words of the prominent 19th century African American abolitionist, author, and orator, and editor and publisher,
Yes, sir.
Frederick Douglass, are important. We're in the midst of Black History Month right now. And for all my history buffs out there, you already know that Frederick Douglass was born a slave in the early 1800s, and he ended up escaping from slavery at the age of 20 years of age. Frederick Douglass went on to become a world-renowned anti-slavery activist, and correlating today's conversation about my work with the historic Houston Forward Times, I'm inspired by the 16 years that Frederick Douglass served as the editor for one of the most influential Black newspapers in the country called the North Star. This is one of the primary reasons that he serves as one of my historical heroes to this day. But not only for that reason. The thing I love about Frederick Douglass is that he was not your run-of-the-mill Black man. Frederick Douglass was not afraid to speak truth to power, and he achieved international fame as an aspiring and persuasive speaker and writer. And he's one of the reasons that I understand the importance of what I do as a journalist, and by writing and embracing the responsibility that I have as an internationally read journalist. I love other quotes by Frederick Douglass, and I'll share a few of those also today. Frederick Douglass once said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." The work that Frederick Douglass did as a reformer was impeccable, as he did everything from being an abolitionist in the early 1840s to his stinging attacks on Jim Crow and lynching in the 1890s. If you ever take a moment and read the thousands and thousands of speeches and editorials that he wrote, you'll discover a man who was not afraid to speak out against racism, not afraid to speak out against slavery without fear or favor. Frederick Douglass understood the importance of dealing with the issues of slavery and racism in this country, and he refused to allow those issues to get swept under the rug or to have a Band-Aid placed on them, as we've seen take place in this country since integration was introduced. Frederick Douglass also said, quote, "I expose slavery in this country because to expose it is to kill it. Slavery is one of those monsters of darkness to whom the light of truth is death," unquote. Frederick Douglass was consistent with his messaging and always sought to give hope to his people while also railing against the politics of slavery that had negatively impacted his people, our people, Black people. He wanted Black people to know that they didn't have to accept their role as slaves and enslaved people of African descent in this country, and that they should open up their eyes and change the way they viewed themselves. Frederick Douglass went on to say, quote, "I didn't know I was a slave until I found out I couldn't do the things that I wanted. We had talked long enough. We were now ready to move. If not now, we never should be. And if we did not intend to move now, we had as well fold our arms, sit down, and acknowledge ourselves fit only to be slaves." I truly hope that all of us, you and I, RTJs that are watching today, are learning some things about this man, Frederick Douglass, that many of us have only read about in history books or only heard about during Black History Month. Frederick Douglass was the absolute truth, and he's a man that should challenge all of us to act differently and, most importantly, think differently. As a people, Black people, we must stop accepting what we're given, discontinue asking and begging other folks to do for us what we can do for ourselves, and stop doing what we're told to do simply. The reason I know we're victims of all these aforementioned things is because we are in a worse condition right here in 2022 in many cases than we were in the 1800s, without access to everything. We're still being murdered, still having our families separated, still being enslaved through mass incarceration and mandatory minimum sentencing, still financially disenfranchised. The wealth gap is tripled and even more so, and still not being properly educated. And sadly, many of us sit back and just take it. Many of us frown against agitation and turn our noses up against protests, people like the Black Lives Matter movement and more. Yet we have no alternative solution to the things that negatively impact us and plague our communities on a daily basis. Then we have the nerve to blame one another for our collective plight and fail to acknowledge the systems and institutions that have been in place since the founding of this country that continue to keep us unhealthy, poorly educated, and disenfranchised financially and politically. Frederick Douglass said, listen, quote, "Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have the exact measure of the injustice and wrong which will be imposed on them. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. When are we going to stop taking it on the chin, y'all? When are we going to rebel against these systems and institutions that are negatively impacting us? When are we going to start stepping up to the plate to advocate change in the Black communities across America? Frederick Douglass said also, I know I'm quoting Frederick, but you need to hear from his mouth through my mouth, actually his words through my mouth. The thing worse than rebellion is the thing that causes rebellion. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. He also said, quote, and this is my last quote of his, I prayed for 20 years, but received no answer until I prayed with my legs. We need to get our act together, y'all. We need to stop treating Frederick Douglass and those like him as some old school Black history figures from back in the day. We need to start listening to the words that he uttered back then and start applying them to our lives today. Because listen, if there was ever a time we needed the words of Frederick Douglass to challenge all of us, that time is now, 2022 and beyond. And that concludes my comments on today. I want to thank my guests today, Mr. Miguel and Ms. Karen Carter Riches, right here on the Forward Times Real Talk Junkie Show. Make sure y'all tune in. The book, like I said, is here, and I'm gonna make sure we get more information out. We're gonna have a book launch coming soon during Black History Month. More on the way. Thank y'all for checking out Real Talk Junkies today. Make sure you tune in next week, y'all. This time next week, Wednesday, 12 noon. Holla at you then.